In all the countries which I visited this time, the situation in relation to the Muslims is practically the same. There is a growing conscious movement being launched to malign Islam, to make it appear ugly and blemished. So this movement seems to be a conscious, organized movement, not on the parts of the governments, I should say, but some sections of the church perhaps have realized that this is the time to build this theme up. Because politically, we have reached a stage where the interest of the West in the Muslim countries is not of the same type and the same strength and same urgency as it was previously. It is an urgency because of the spreading influence of Russia over the Middle East and other countries of the East. So that was the main fear which kept them from showing any disagreement with Islam, which of course they should have. Actually they had, openly, because they did not want to throw the Muslims away and further apart. They knew if they do it, they would go to the Russian pocket. So that situation has completely changed. Russia itself is now dependent on their goodwill in so many ways. So that shadow or canopy which was cast by Russia, not intentionally, but it happened over the Muslims, and which saved them from many a difficult situation, is no longer there. So one thing is certain, that we have some difficult times ahead, because Islam is being maligned, so maliciously, such wickedness and such bitterness, that I have never seen that before in the pre-collapse of Berlin Wall era. So first tell this and then I'll illustrate it by some examples. No, last time when I went to Spain, and in the previous visits as well, I found very clearly that particularly the southern part of Spain is no longer interested in Christianity or anything. The influence of socialism was much stronger in the southern provinces, in Andalusia and other adjacent provinces, and so they practically mocked at Christianity and Christian values, and they were drifting away. Also, I noticed in the north that although the communist movement or socialist movement is not strong in the north, but atheism was corroding the religious values very rapidly all along. So now, because of the new situation, Church has got this opportunity to attract them to Christianity by attacking Islam and presenting the figure of Christianity that, you see, we have emerged victorious in the end. So this has served some purpose, and people are turning, it's not all of course, but a section of the society is now turning to a sort of Christianity which is a militant Christianity, not the Christianity of Christ. Because the pro-Islam present Islam as a militant force, knocking again at the doors of Europe, threatening, and it invokes, this attitude invokes many a past phantom of Islamic inroads into Europe or Muslim inroads into Europe. So out of reaction to that, the other pole is created, which is characteristically the same. It is militant Islam which is being presented, and a militant Christianity is born with no forgiveness, a sense of revenge and so on. So this is again a very, very serious situation which is developing there. Now this hardening of Muslim, Christian attitude against Islam, I said, seems to be a conspiracy. Because it's happening everywhere in the West. I've been to America, the same is the story there. The other day, a young Ahmadi college student came from Greece, and I was surprised to find that exactly the media in Greece is following the same policy. So much so that he told me that although he was in the college for a long time, he studied with so many friends and students who knew him so well, and they were so friendly before. Now because of this propaganda of the media, they are looking at him with suspicion and also with some suppressed hatred, which is visible from their eyes and glances. And some of them who are outspoken, who they clearly told him, look here, you belong to a filthy religion which is militant, it believes in terrorism, which believes in this and that. What is happening here? What is happening there? And they would not mention any Christian movements which have the same attitude towards their problems, that is, solution of their problems with force. They would not mention any Buddhist movements which have the same attitude, any Hindu movements which have the same attitude. We simply do not see them, as if their eyes have become only one-sided. So I told him, I said, why don't you quote, what are you doing in Bosnia? Is it Muslims who are at fault? What were Christians doing in Ireland, for instance? In what name the fight was? It was in the name of Christianity. Most militants of Ireland were born with the Christian ideology, and they supported and they fought in the name of Christianity. And what happened in Sri Lanka, mass murders taking place in the name of Buddhism or in the name of Hindu, or what they call it, not Hinduism, but the southern Indian people who are they believe in Kali Devi. What are these people? Tamils. Now Tamil is a language. It's from the south of India, larger area of South India.
Remember the name Khamir al-Humr? Khamir al-Humr, the red Khamir or something like this, the Tamils. There is a movement against them and they are fighting against them.
But what I am saying is, Tamil is basically the name of a language, and the people who speak that language are called Tamils. But in Sri Lanka, their Hindu stamp was different from the other Hindu groups. And not only there, but in India as well. The Hindu sect is very distinct from the others. And they believe in Black Devi, the black goddess. And their doctrine is quite distinctly different. So they don't call themselves Hindus. There's a large number in Mauritius, and I met some of their leaders, and they told me that they're not Hindus, they're Tamils. But what I'm going to say is simply this, that the fight between Tamils and the Buddhists is not taken notice of by the West. And what is happening to Muslims in India is not noticed by them. When a Hindu militant leader, and a very powerful and well-known leader for that matter, declares in Bombay that I'm going to chuck away the 100 million Muslims of India who are aliens here, who have no right to live in our country. I'm giving notice first to the Bombay Muslims, just vacate our city, or be ready for total destruction. Now, when they hear this, they do not hear it. Nothing is happening. So this I have been telling not only to this young boy who met me and told me this is the problem, the gravity of the problem, but I have been also telling others to follow this way of argument and tell them to come to senses. A movement must be started whereby we bring Christianity and Islam closer and together. for the ultimate benefit of Islam, of the world. If we go on behaving so stupidly, then the world will be in for a very bad time in future, because this is going to create huge problems and bombshells. Now, there was a movement, there was a television program on Spain. I'll speak of that after you have translated, please. Now again, this is very important to note that we observe in different countries, Islamic countries, etc., a movement against their own countries, against their own governments. And they themselves preach hatred and violence in the name of Islam. So when we find this, what we are doing practically is strengthening the hands of the enemies against Islam. So they emphasize these things in their propaganda. And in Algeria, for instance, what's happening? And the oppression by the government of the movement in the name of Islam has no logic on either side, because it's a Muslim government against whom they are fighting. They're, working the sentiments of the people against their own Muslim brothers. And what is happening in Egypt? Everywhere the situation is similar. The threat posed by Islam, so-called Islam, is against the Muslims themselves. Nowhere against the non-Muslims. The threat created by them is against Islam, because their propaganda is working very strongly and very powerfully and agitating the minds of the people who had previously no interest in religion either way, neither against nor for. So these are the very dangerous things in which Muslims themselves, with their own stupidity and lack of superior wisdom, are strengthening the enemy's hands, and what Islam is reduced to is simply a force which is destructive for itself, which is suicidal, no more. Now what is happening in Afghanistan? A movement was launched against Russian presence, which was understood by common people as the presence of anti-God forces, anti-God ideology, anti-God attitudes. That is how the common man understood the philosophy of scientific socialism, no more. They didn't understand its economic programs and the logic behind it, things. All that was summed up by the common simple man was that it's a godless philosophy, it's against religion. And as such, a movement was launched at a great sacrifice on the part of the common Afghan Muslim freedom fighters, who did it only for the sake of Islam, for defense of Islam, and for the sake of having their country vacated by the atheist presence. Now that has long been vacated now. They have evacuated this country. What are they fighting about now? See? Muslims are fighting Muslims, they are shedding their Muslim blood. There were two divisions first, the third has been added as if it was not enough. And this Taliban, they're fighting this triangular fight going on. No end to it. It's a war of attrition. But the most unbelievable thing is that each party is fighting in the name of God, in the name of Hadhrat Muhammad Rasulullah, in the name of Islam. This is what Islam has come to. Now they quote it not to create the right picture of Muslims fighting with each other, not to tell them, you lie in peace, no problem for you. This is a strange religion which only evokes hatred against their own brothers. An occasional bombshell here and there would not destroy the Christian might, of course. A madman can do that. But as far as the Muslim people are concerned, they should tell them, Don't worry, they are all right. They're fighting among themselves. There is no time left for non-Muslims. But they don't present it like this. They present it in a very different perspective. The program which I mentioned in Spain, it happened just before my arrival in Spain, the television program. But the Jamaat members who were also invited to participate, they had been in touch with me. I told them what line to take. I knew this would be coming. There is no secret about it. This is what they are going to say, so get ready and quote all these things. Now, what they did was, there was almost a rabid Christian priest who was so violent in his allegations against Islam. He had completely no knowledge of Islam itself. What he had was, he had read the most violent propaganda of the previous centuries when the time of Isabella and Ferdinand. And that was his latest information about Islam. And he tied it up with these incidents of occasional bombshell here and there, this terrorist movement. And he spoke so harshly and so destructively of Islam and its leaders, and so insultingly of Hadhrat Muhammad ﷺ, that when they told me, I was angry with them. I said, why didn't you leave in protest? You should not have participated there anymore. You would have told the organizers that, look here, if this is what you have called us for, we don't sit here, we cannot hear this nonsense, and we walk out in protest. But they said, we tolerated it because we were promised a time where we could defend the cause of Islam. So we said, maybe our personal sacrifice, people will get benefit. So although it was impossible, very difficult to say, we kept. And you know what they did? The time when it was finished, they gave them only 3 minutes. And even then they were interfered with. So in those 3 minutes, all they could say is all is a package of lies and just venom which he is spitting against Islam like a cobra, that's all, no more. But with the grace of Allah, this much effect was created. The ordinary people who watched this program, they reacted very strongly against the whole management and against the way the affair was carried out. And they started receiving Ahmadis letters of apologies and appreciation. Said your attitude was civilized, and those who were posing to be civilized and calling Islam as uncivilized people, Muslims as uncivilized people, they themselves were just brutes. So with the grace of Allah, the effect was good, but it is because of Ahmadiyya presence. If somebody else had presented, he might have justified, like here they do in television here in England, they could have justified the attitude of militants against the non-Muslims on the authority of the Quran. See, that is the dilemma we are facing today. They had promised them that they would be given enough time to rebut whatever is said against Islam. And they did not keep the promise. And there was one area, I don't remember the name, but in the south of Spain, from the municipality of that area reacted as a whole so powerfully in favor of the Ahmadiyya decent attitude and against their own priest, that the head of that area wrote a letter of apology to the Ahmadi presenter and said that we are going to have a book fair very soon. So we invite you to bring your literature and we'll offer you this free place. And counter this propaganda. You have a right to counter it. And I told them they have accepted it with the grace of Allah. So if you do it for the sake of Allah, then Allah finds ways and means for you to ultimately emerge victorious. But you should do it rightly as Islam permits you, not carried away by your own emotions. And also you give addresses there, speeches. Now, when I came, there's so much to be said about Spain later on, maybe, if you're still interested in the subject of how I found Spain, what we did there, and this and that. We'll speak of it maybe tomorrow, if you like. But pursuing the same subject, now I turn to France. In France I stayed for a few days, and people from all walks of life, Ahmadis and some non-Ahmadis, they all came and participated in question answer sessions. There an Arab journalist stood up and told me that there is a movement launched here by the government on dividing Islam on two planes. They have coined some phrases. They say Islam for France or Islam of France. Which Islam would be acceptable to the French people? Now, when they say Islam of France, the translation was a bit defective, so after a while I came to understand what he meant. What he meant was that the French media is now openly reminding the people, repeatedly reminding the people, that Islam, if it turns our way, if it becomes in a social pattern, behavior, etc., a French sort of religion, then we should accept it. Otherwise, if it brings some foreign elements of the way of life, then we should not accept it. Now, instead of saying it in so many words, they explain it and ask the people, telephone on that number, write on that address. Would you like an Islam of the French, or imported Islam for the French? And the answer is obviously, of course we want French Islam, not the other one. Now this movement was again launched because of a very stupid attitude of the Algerian Muslim fighters. Now, I met their leadership, I tried my best, not all the leadership, but some during my last tour. I tried my utmost to make them understand that you are fighting in fact for government, and you are dragging Islam for exploitation. Otherwise your rulers are Muslims, open-minded Muslims or rigid Muslims. This is the fight about. It's not non-Muslims and Muslims. The issue is not that of non-Muslims and Muslims. It's just more open-minded and sensible Muslims or rigid and backwards and medieval type of Muslims. Now, because the mullahs mostly belong to that age, so the common illiterate people follow the mullah. And whenever they can exploit this deviation in favor of their own personal ends of political ascendancy, they do not hesitate. In the name of Islam, Muslims are divided and schisms are created, and Muslim blood is declared to be halal, permissible by these ulama in the name of Islam. So I have been telling you, for God's sake, behave, have common sense, and you have turned the whole world against yourself by acquiring this stupid attitude. Why don't you start this movement in the name of democracy? A term which is so well understood by the West. And why do you strengthen the hands of your own so-called enemies of the government? The simple issue is that the elected House of Parliament had a majority of these extremists. Now, if the power was handed over to them because of the image they themselves had created of themselves, that we are going to hate the West, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, they were afraid that if power was transferred to these extremists, in the name of religion they can go to any extreme. And Muslims once they are aroused in the name of religion, become a very difficult entity to handle. This is the past experience. So all the sympathies of the people who uphold democracy was turned against the democratically elected people, and was turned in favor of those who were suppressing the democratic rights, just because of the stupid, crooked attitude of the people themselves. And the leaders among them are in fact not that bloodthirsty as they appear. What they want is simply power, political power, in whatever name they want. And they think that they will do better justice, dispense matters with better justice than the present government can. And they will do things for the sake of people instead of enjoying a life of luxury of a very high level which the country cannot afford. They plan to bring the way of life closer to the simplicity of Islam. Now, the intentions are good, and that's what I've been telling them. I said, for your intentions, I fully support. Muslims need such governments today. They are sympathetic, philanthropists, which really know the problems at the lowest level of life and sympathetically act for them. But you are destroying your own cause by bringing the militant movements of Islam into the picture, and the countries which could have supported you very strongly, because they are in fact the strongest advocates of democracy, like America, they are now against you. So now this was the talk between me and them. What does the public know about it? The French public only knows this, that it's a movement of terrorism, of bloodshed, of innocent people, of violence against the women in streets and children, etc. And that is what Islam is. That is what Islam stands for. And when they say it, they don't rebut this. They further support it by some Quranic verses which are misinterpreted. Yes, we have right. The Quran gives us the right. Now, the image of the Holy Quran, the image of Islam is tarnished. What bleeds is not Algeria, Islam bleeds. And Islam bleeds not only in Algeria, but everywhere, the whole of the West. And in the French streets you can see the blood, you can smell the blood of Islam. But by whom? Shed by whom? By the Muslims themselves. So in this background, when they talk of Islam of France, or Islam for France, imported from outside, you can see the reaction would be only one-sided. No, nothing to do with that Islam. And their attitude against Algerians has stiffened so much that along with it, against all Muslims. You know, for instance, those who are given proper visas and who have been in and out of France so many times, and although after the present new system, people who, for instance, have British visas, and there are many Ahmadis who have told me that having the British visas, they should not have been stopped moving between France and Spain and Germany, etc. But just because they are Muslims, they are stopped. And they are put to grave trouble, they are asked to wait and treated insultingly. So what is happening in the world of Islam today is a suicidal policy on the part of the Muslims, and a policy of making best out of it for the sake of losing Christian values. So whether this is a set policy of the government, political leaders of the West, or it is just a chance opportunity for the Christian fathers, etc., leaders of Christianity, to exploit this situation in favor of Christianity, Allah knows best. But this is what I've seen with my own eyes. This is what is happening, unfortunately. And also an Islam which chucks away all the policies, all the teachings of Islam regarding chastity, regarding good behavior, regarding segregation of sexes. This goes with it. No, what they say.
Yes.
If Islam, either that Islam or this which we will make it, for you. Islamic ideology and morality, etc., everything should be checked away. Now the question is, how should we respond? What should be the strategy on the part of the Muslims to ward this evil off? I believe that it all depends on the leadership of the Muslims to get together and to analyze the problem and to carve a path which is based on the Islamic teachings. Only then they can deliver the Muslim Ummah from this predicament and this very unfortunate situation. Now what happens is, when we read the Muslims outside, they read this Western propaganda and all this, they see the hypocrisy, then they are really agitated as a whole. Against whom? Not against their own leaders who have created these situations. Not against the leaders in the West who are unknown, whose faces are unknown, who have exploited this situation, but against the West in general. While the common people here are innocent. They themselves have nothing against Islam. I have noticed this, and again with reference to my tour of France and Germany, in Spain itself, France and Spain, in Spain itself, in the old monuments of the Muslims, with the legacy, this left behind, the glorious legacy, I discussed the fair things with some tourist groups from Spain, and their attitude was slightly stiffer to begin with than before. But when I started explaining things to them, they became so friendly. I was surprised. So that means that the propaganda has still got only a skin-deep influence. It has not penetrated deeper. But if we react violently against the common people of the West, the Europeans as such, or the Americans or Canadians as such, then we'll damage our own cause. Then the anti-Muslim feelings will go deeper into their lifestyle and thinking, and Islam would suffer a lot at the hand of the Muslim attitude itself. So I have been telling the Western people, wherever I go and address them and have discussions with their leadership, that they should behave. This is the right time not for them to exploit the fall of Russia and take their revenge against Muslims. This is a very stupid policy which will not pay them dividends. This is the time when they should plead love and brotherhood and bring the whole world together and create a movement whereby Muslims and Christians work hand in hand for the common peace of the whole humanity, not of nations. Justice to be done to the world affairs as such. They are not being treated with justice, unfortunately. They are treated only with the racial attitudes. So this I tell them, but to the Muslims I give this message very clearly, that react in the Islamic style. Udu ila sabili rabbika, Udu ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal mu'izati hasanati wa jadilhum billati hi ahsan. Use wisdom and common sense. And if you have to fight it out, do it with the best things you have in your hand. And the most beautiful things are the teachings of the Quran. So use wisdom and try to bridge the gaps rather than to create chasms and voids between people and people. These two nations, Islam, Muslims and Christians, can play a most vital role in the world to come. If they fall apart, then there will be no peace for the world. If they get together, then the world will have a safe haven before their eyesight. Only a few steps in that direction and they will land in the safety of cooperation between Islam and Christianity. So this is the nutshell, the end which I want to tell you.